being there for one another and having hard times and forgiveness and how hard it is to be a woman and all the other kind of things that we talk about at these women prayers. And it just so happens, I told y'all last time, I love to go in, and I'm like one of those people that go on YouTube and watch testimonies, like, people that do testimonies. Before I know it, I've sat there for 2 hours in bed and watched 37 testimonies, because I just love to hear different stories. But my favorite testimony is this one right here. And I've always loved it, and it's always just, I always brag on her a lot, and to other people, I'm like, there's this lady at our church, that has this just awesome testimony about, forgiveness and how rough life can be sometimes, and how you don't have to carry that junk around, and how you can let it go. So I always brag about her. And then we met a couple weeks ago with Ansel, and her awesome testimony even just got even better. This last part of it, I found out. And then as soon as she told me that, I was like, you're sharing this with as many people that I can get. So you're going to do a women's prayer, and then if I can get people anywhere to listen to you, because I really think that God has used her. So I want y'all to listen up to Miss Kathy Hughes. Yay. And she's nervous.
A little bit. I will have to say this has been a real emotional day for me. Going back through everything that's happened to me and reliving it and opening up old wounds, but hopefully they'll heal more. So it's an ongoing thing. So some of the things that I'm going to tell you are hard for me to talk about, and some of the things are hard to admit, but it is my story, and it's a story of how God has turned a mess into a message. I know you've heard that a lot, but this is a true story of that. And it's the amazing way that God's worked in my life. And it's only through God's love and grace that I can sit here and tell you this story. For most of my life, it's been a secret. It's been buried deep down inside. So most of my young life, when I was younger, I felt unloved, I felt unwanted, alone, worthless. I had deep scars of broken trust. I never, to my knowledge, can remember hearing my mother or my father say, I love you, or I'm proud of you. I just felt like I never really belonged anywhere. The people that were supposed to protect me did not protect me. The people that I was supposed to trust, I couldn't trust. So on the outside, my family looked like just a normal, regular family, but on the inside, there was a lot of deep, dark secrets. And it all started when I was 5 years old. That is when he came into my life and stole my innocence. For 5 years, I was sexually abused. He convinced me that he was the only person that cared about me. He convinced me that if I told anybody, that I would be the one to get in trouble, that it was my fault, that I was doing the bad things. I learned to hide behind my smile. I learned to lie, to cover up my pain. I learned to build walls around myself, to hide what was happening. My mind was so consumed with all of this that years later, when I did talk to a therapist about it, I was told that I don't have very many childhood memories because my mind was so consumed with what was happening. When I hear my sisters talk about things that happened in my family or things that we did, I don't remember any of that. So that was taken away from me also. School was my safe place because I knew when I was in school that he couldn't get to me there. And it was the only place that I could kind of let my guard down, be comfortable, and be me. I was quiet, I was shy. I didn't make friends very easily because I didn't trust people. I was always afraid I would say something or do something and somebody would find out, so I mostly kept to myself. When I was 10 years old, I got a little braver and I started fighting back, and that's when the abuse ended. Because I would cry and scream when he would come near me or in my house. So he got scared apparently, and it ended. So I was finally free of that. But I buried those scars deep down. Nobody ever knew. I never told anyone. So in middle school, I just felt like a normal kid. I wasn't popular, but I did have a few friends. We weren't rich. We were kind of more in the poor class. But I had some friends, and I kind of felt normal, if you can say normal. When I was 14, I was invited to a birthday party. And this birthday party was one of the guys at school. He was one of the popular guys at school. And I was like, why are they inviting me? I don't know these people, really. I mean, I know who they are. I don't run around with them, and they didn't invite my few friends that I had. But I thought, okay, well, maybe I'm going to make some good new friends. Maybe I'll be accepted into their group. And, so I went along to the party. And of course, in those days, young people, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have anything like that. So my mom had to take me, drop me off, and then pick me up at a certain time. So I was kind of excited to go to the party. And I went to the party, and like I said, I knew the people from school, but I didn't really know them. But we started talking, and I started talking to one girl in particular, and we kind of got to be friends, and she introduced me to some of her friends that she had there with her, some of her guy friends, and we all started talking, and it's a typical teenage party, you know how those are. And so one of them said, well, let's just go. There was behind the house where we had the party was woods, and there was like little trails back there. So one of them suggested that we go in the woods on the trail. So, there was 4 of us. So I thought, well, I didn't have any reason to not trust them, So we started into the woods and walked through the woods, and then things drastically changed when we got there. I was pushed to the ground and raped by both boys, while the girl that was my friend held me down, covered my mouth, and told me that if I screamed or if I said anything to anybody, that she would swear I was a liar. She would swear it never happened. And I was petrified. I was embarrassed. I was humiliated. I didn't know what to do. Afterwards, when we went back to the house, they were laughing and joking like nothing ever happened. And in my mind, I'm thinking, is this why I was invited to this party? Was this something that they had planned this whole time? So I waited for my mom to pick me up. And as I had learned so early in life, I hid everything. I went home and, of course, cried myself to sleep, but I never told anyone again. So the next place I found myself is 15 and pregnant. I was scared. I was in denial for a very long time, and I didn't know what to do. I had nobody I could go to. And when I couldn't hide it anymore, I finally had to tell my mom. And of course, she wanted me to have an abortion. I refused to do that. So I was taken to DHS. And that's when they decided that I was going to be sent away. I was sent away to the Florence Crittenton Home for Unwed Mothers in Knoxville, Tennessee. And that's where I would stay until I had my baby. I was told that I had to give up my baby, that I did not have a choice. And that was it. I wasn't given anything, any options. This is what was going to happen, and that's how it was going to be. So I was picked up at my home by a DHS worker and driven to Knoxville. My parents wouldn't even take me there. I remember crying as I drove away because I knew no one. Sorry. I was alone, I was scared, and I was 15 years old, and I felt like I was just being thrown away. I stayed in that group home for 6 months, and during the time I was there, I didn't have any visits, and I didn't have any phone calls. Occasionally I would get a letter, but that was it. It was like, people just forgot about me. I was a total embarrassment to everybody. while I was there, I was constantly told that I could not keep my baby, that I could not see my baby, that I could not ask questions about my baby, that even after I had the baby, when I signed the papers, that I could never, ever look for him or her, because that was just what I was signing, that I would never, ever try to do that. So I just figured that was just the end. And so I was told I was not worthy, I was not responsible enough, and of course I knew I was 15, I couldn't, you know, I had no money, I had no job, and so I knew I couldn't take care of that baby. So, but most people believed that I willingly gave up my baby, but that's not true. When I went into labor, I was taken to UT Hospital in Knoxville, dropped off and left by myself. I was in pain and I was terrified. And they gave me a drug called Twilight. I don't know why I remember that, I just do. And it's given to you so you won't remember anything. And I don't remember anything. The only thing that I do remember is after I had the baby, I was in a room on a floor, and I don't know if to me it looked like a closet. I don't really know what it was, but it was like 3 floors away from the nursery in the back of the hospital, because then whenever you were pregnant and you had a baby, it was horrible. You know, it wasn't accepted by anybody. So I was kind of put back there by myself. I wasn't allowed to see the baby. I wasn't allowed to hold the baby, but I had to give him a name. And that's the only thing they would ask me is, what do you want to name your baby? You know, like, well, you know, I really want to see the baby. No, you can't. So I was in that room for 3 days. Nobody called. Nobody came to visit me. Nobody was there, just me. And I cried all the time. I felt alone. I felt abandoned. I felt unloved. I cried for the baby that I would never know. I cried for the emptiness that I felt. And I cried for the love that I desperately wanted. I was 15 years old and I was totally broken. There was one nurse in the hospital that would come into my room, and she was the only nurse that was nice to me. And she asked me one day, she said, do you want me to sneak you down to the nursery so you can see your baby? And I said, yeah. So she put me in a wheelchair and she rolled me down to the nursery. And they had him in the back of the nursery, turned around so he was facing the other way. All I could see was the back of his head. And all I remember is he had a head of dark hair. And that's all I could see. And I just kind of sat there for a long time, just looking at him, knowing that I would never know this child. So the next day, I decided I was going to sneak out of my room myself and walk down and see the baby. And maybe they moved him up front so I could see him or something. And so I walked down to the nursery, you know, hoping to get a better glimpse of him, but he was gone. And my heart broke. So after I got back home and started back to school, I went wild. I had so much hate and so much anger inside of me that I didn't care. I didn't care what people thought about me. I didn't care what I did. I started sneaking out. I started smoking, drinking, partying, sleeping around, and experimenting in things that could have hurt me really badly. But I just didn't care. I was in a very, very dark place. I hated myself so much. And I felt like everything was my fault. So somehow I managed to graduate high school. I don't really remember how I did that. But I did graduate, and I was pregnant again when I crossed that stage to get my diploma. So I got married against my parents' wishes when I was 17. So I was married with a baby at 17. And between the drugs, the alcohol, the cheating, and the violence, that marriage didn't even last a year. Time passed. I married again, had 2 more children. And this marriage lasted 10 years, but my husband was an alcoholic. So that marriage ended in divorce also. So I felt like a total, complete failure. And I would always ask myself, why am I not good enough? What's wrong with me? So a little later, single with 3 children, I finally met somebody that actually cared about me, but it was someone that did not know my past, didn't know anything about my past. He treated me with love and respect, and he quickly became the love of my life. We'll be married 30 years this year, actually. He was different than any man I had ever been with, because most of the men I had ever been with were on drugs or drinking or, not very good people at all. So I buried my past, and I started all over with my new husband and my new family, and I buried it pretty deep. It's like it never happened. I was just a different person. And it wasn't always easy, because we had 6 children between us, but we managed, and we were together until they grew up, had families of their own, and life was pretty good. I couldn't complain. A couple of years later, I got a frantic phone call one night from my youngest son. He and his wife had just had a beautiful baby girl the week before, and he had just gone back to work. When he got home from work that night, he found his wife dead. The autopsy showed that she had got an infection in her bloodstream and had died of sepsis. She was 23 years old. She left behind my 21-year-old son, our beautiful 8-day-old baby, and her precious 18-month-old baby boy. My son's world was crushed, and it totally destroyed him. He turned to drugs to ease his pain, which led him to a life of addiction, a life of being in and out of jail. He couldn't cope. He couldn't take care of himself. So we took our 2 grandchildren into our home to raise as our own. And starting all over again, we took it one day at a time. And our life took on a different kind of normal. When the kids got a little older, especially Katie, she would always say, please, let's find a church. Please, can we go to church? And I would always have an excuse. I would always put them off. I had so much anger and bitterness still in me. I didn't want to go to church. I didn't feel like that was a place that I belonged. I felt like my life had changed. I was a good person now. I wasn't doing the things I used to do, so I didn't really need church. I had everything under control. I was in control of everything. And so I never took them. A couple of years later, my mother-in-law became very sick. And the last couple of weeks of her life, we would all visit and sit with her pretty often. And I would sit with her for a long time. And when I'd sit with her, I would watch her, and she would look up into the sky like she was talking to somebody or she was seeing somebody. And I would always wonder, who is she seeing? What is she seeing? She would talk about her children in the past tense, like she would talk about them being like young, like they were there now. And it was just amazing just to watch her. And I would always wonder, who is she talking to? Because you would have to actually say her name pretty loud to get her back to focus on you. She was somewhere else. And I kept thinking, where is she at? What is she doing? So one night, my niece's pastor came, and I didn't know him. My husband knew him from a long time ago, and they talked for a long time. He came into the room where Pauline was, and he talked to her for a little bit. By then she had stopped responding for 2 days. I don't think she had responded. So he came in and he sat down and he talked to her, and of course he got no response. And I started to leave the room, and I thought, something just told me just to stay here, just stay in the room, and So I stayed there, and before he left, he took her by the hand and he said, Miss Pauline, do you know Jesus Christ is your Savior? And if I had not been in that room and seen it with my eyes, she opened her eyes and looked at him and said, yes, as plain as day. And I was shocked because she hadn't responded in 2 days. And then she closed her eyes, and that was the last thing she ever said. And she passed away the next morning, very peacefully. Well, I couldn't get that out of my head. That was on my mind from that moment on for days. I kept hearing this voice in my head saying, you need, and it is all revolved around Ansel. Okay, he was the preacher that was there. And you need to follow him. You need to go hear him preach. You need, you know. So I told Bill, and he preached Pauline's funeral, and it was beautiful. I mean, it touched me so much, the things he said, the way he said it. So I told Bill, I said, we need to go to church. We need to go to church Sunday. So we went to that little church, the fairground, and the goofy preacher. And I haven't looked back since. We started attending church regularly then. And God revealed to me that he had been with me my entire life. And that he had seen everything that had happened to me. He couldn't give me back what had been taken away from me, but he could restore me. He could replace what was broken and stolen. He could take away my guilt, my shame, my fear, and he could put my pieces back together. He promised that he would never leave me, and I would never feel alone again. That he could transform me and heal me, and that my life did not have to be a secret anymore. And the only way was to repent of my sins and ask him into my heart. So on September 1st that year, I walked the aisle and I gave my life to Jesus Christ. It was the best decision I had ever made in my life. And I felt like I had finally been accepted. And since that time, God has shown me that he's always been there for me. Even when I rejected him, even when I cursed him, even when I hated him. He took all of my broken pieces and started putting me back together. I prayed that God would take the hate out of my heart and show me how to forgive the people that had hurt me. So instead of cursing these people, I started praying for them. Was it easy? No, not at all. And it's still a work in progress to this day. But one by one, I'm learning to forgive. God has done so many miracles in my life since I've been saved, and I'll tell you a few. I don't have time to tell you all of them. We'll be here all night. But one of the miracles God blessed me with was the relationship that I have today with the baby boy that I thought I would never see again. God gave him the information that he needed to find me several years ago. And I can tell you that was a phone call that I will never forget, ever. I learned that he had had a great life. He had a wonderful, loving family. He actually had watched a movie on TV that led him to want to find me because he was afraid something had happened to me, and he wanted to make his life complete knowing who I was. I also found out, to my amazement and surprise, that for the first 3 years of his life, he lived 1 block away from me. That's another whole story in itself. But we can't get back the years that we missed, but we can live the rest of our lives together and loving each other. So that was one of my great miracles. Another miracle in progress, I call it, is that God has blessed me with the honor and the privilege of raising Brandon and Caitlin. I thank God every day that they're in my life. I know life hasn't been easy for either one of them, and I've tried to love them and give them the best life that I can. But they've really taught me more than I've taught them. And they'll never realize how proud of the young man and the young woman they're becoming that I am. I love both of them, and I thank God for them every day. And I call it my miracle in progress because they're teenagers. If you've ever had teenagers, you know what I mean. So it might be a miracle if they make it. But, and last but not least, and this is my biggest miracle that has happened recently. Um, and God works in so many mysterious ways. It's amazing. Of all the people that I needed to forgive, there was one person in my life that I just could not hardly bring myself to forgive. And that was the girl that helped in my rape. I always resented her. She was a woman. A girl, not a woman. But your friends are supposed to be there for you. They're not supposed to do stuff like that. They're supposed to help you. Women are supposed to bond and be together and not, you're not supposed to do stuff like that. So I think of all the people, of everything that ever happened to me, she was the one that I resented the most, that I just could not even fathom the thought of forgiving her. I had so much hate in my heart for her for so long. Periodically, throughout the years, and I know y'all have done this, don't say you haven't, I looked her up, tried to find her, tried to see, okay, but I didn't know her last name because women get married, so, I was hoping that when I found her that she was this, ugly, fat, crackhead, no teeth, no life, homeless, I could think of a lot more words, but I never, and I didn't pursue it like it was an obsession of mine to do that, but I did occasionally every once in a while throughout the years. But, she okay? So one day, I've lost my place. One day, not too long ago, about a year and a half ago, I think, I was looking on Facebook, and you have the people on Facebook, people you may know thing, and I was scrolling through, and I saw a name, and it was her brother's name, and it stopped me because he spelled his name a little different than normal. And this person's name was spelled that way. So I thought, really? Maybe, he lived in a different state, so I thought it's probably not him. But anyway, so I clicked on this guy, and to my amazement, we had one mutual friend. Okay, so I'm thinking, okay, who is this one mutual friend that we have? When I looked, I saw who she was, and I finally found her. For a little while, I think my heart stopped beating. I became sick because I knew her. She was my friend on Facebook. I found her in this church. So I didn't know what to do. At first I was like, okay, I'm quitting church. I'm not coming back again. I'm not going to come back. I can't do it. I can't see her. But then, and I did pull back some for a while. I kind of pulled back. And I remember the first time seeing her in church thinking, she looks really familiar to me, but where do I know her from? And I'm, asking who she is, and they're telling me, and I'm like, I don't know her, but she's still, something clicked there, but I didn't put two and two together. So, I didn't know what to do. It took a while for me to settle down and slowly start looking at things in perspective like I should have, instead of my, vengeance. I want to kill her and all that stuff. She's very beautiful, very beautiful. She has a wonderful family. Her children are beautiful. Her children are saved. She's saved. Her grandchildren are saved. She has a great job. She has a wonderful husband. She has a beautiful home. And I won't lie, part of me got very angry. Wasn't fair. How could God give her this great, great life after what she did to me? So, but I had to keep praying because I wasn't thinking good thoughts, and I had to pray. And I could tell the bitterness was starting to eat at me, so I prayed more, and I prayed more. I did pull back from church, like I said, but I kept praying. And I kept this to myself for a long time because that's what I do. I've learned to do that, and that's just what I do. So one Sunday, I had been thinking about it a lot, and I prayed before church, and I'm like, God, give me an answer today before the end of the service, please. Do I talk about this? Do I tell somebody about it? Or do I just bury it and let it go? And just, So, and I prayed that almost during the whole sermon. I can't even tell you what the sermon was that day, but I can tell you what part of it was. Part of that sermon was about forgiveness. So I thought, okay, there's my answer. So I did open up that day and start talking about it. It's not easy. It's not easy. And I prayed and I prayed. But I learned that forgiveness is not for that person. Forgiveness was for me. Forgiveness was something that I had to do to heal, to move on and forget it. It's a conscious decision to release the hurt and the pain and the feelings of resentment and vengeance. And whether they deserve it or not. I don't know that this person even knows who I am. And I don't really want to know. I want to put it to rest. So I'm happy to say that I finally freed from that chain that's been holding me for 46 years. God answered my prayers and I have forgiven her. I actually can like her Facebook posts now without cringing. So God can work miracles. He does work miracles. So I don't know where I'd be today without my Lord and Savior, but I can tell you where I wouldn't be. I wouldn't be right here. I wouldn't be telling you this story. I wouldn't be praying that each of you know Him as your Lord and Savior as well. I don't know what you all have been through. I don't know what you may be going through, but I do know that God loves you. He wants what's best for you, and He does hear your prayers. It may not be in your timing, but He will answer your prayers. So all you have to do is ask Him into your heart, and He can change your life because He changed mine. That's it.